Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, February the 3rd, 2026. So I am making this video on February the 2nd, and February the 2nd is the Christian festival of Candlemas, and I believe Candlemas was in a tradition when Christ was presented at the temple just after he had been born. And from a Celtic perspective, this is the festival of imbolc, which is a word, I believe it means something like lamb's milk, and it's the beginning of the milking season. February the 2nd is also Groundhog Day. So as far as this video is concerned, I'm making it for February the 3rd, because I'm doing the astrology for I Ching and so on for Tuesday, February the 3rd. And February the 3rd is the day after Candlemas. However, from an astrological perspective, you could argue that it is the Astrological Candlemas, and the reason being is, Candlemas, imbolc, it's a cross-quarter day in the Celtic calendar, and a cross-quarter day is roughly halfway between the solstice and the equinox, and the point between the solstice and the equinox, from an astrological perspective, well, if you think about it, the solstice, the sun is at 0 degrees Capricorn, equinox, sun is at 0 degrees Aries, so halfway between the two is 15 degrees Aquarius. And today, February the 3rd, the sun is at 15 degrees Aquarius, and I want to set up a chart for that precise moment when the sun is at that point, when it's halfway between the solstice and the equinox, and that's what I want to talk about at the end of this video, because I do regard it as a moment of power. It's kind of an astrological Celtic festival, an astrological Candlemas. But anyway, let's look at the astrology and I Ching for today, first of all. And don't forget to, by the way, like and subscribe if appropriate. So here is the chart for today, set for noon New York time. So as far as what's going on, you can see that the moon is in Virgo. So the moon goes into Virgo, well, London time, moon goes into Virgo pretty early in the morning, 3:21 a.m. So if you're in Australia or New Zealand, you might have to wait until the early afternoon before you get this lunar sign change. But, it does, make a difference. Moon moving from Leo to Virgo, moon moves into an earth sign, and there isn't a great deal of Earth around except for Uranus in Taurus, so you could argue that Moon in Virgo does help to stabilize things. Additionally, Moon in Virgo represents the end of the immediate full moon period. So we had a full moon at the end of a weekend at 13 degrees, was it 13 degrees something Leo? I think it was at 13 degrees for Leo. And so, while the sun was in Aquarius and the moon was in Leo, this was the immediate period, of a full moon. And now that the moon is in Virgo, the moon is no longer in the opposite sign to the sun. You could argue that there is less pressure. Things might not be quite so intense. It has been quite a difficult time. I mean, I don't know about you, but things have just been going on. Things have been happening and not happening, and it's for many of us, it has been a frustrating time. So maybe with the moon moving into Virgo, things could just get a little bit easier. And the moon in Virgo doesn't actually do a great deal. The moon doesn't make any sort of fantastic aspects. The moon will eventually make a trine to Uranus, but not until the very end of the sign. And so, have I got that right? I don't think. It'll make an opposition to Saturn, but again, that opposition to Saturn is certainly not going to happen today. It may only just happen tomorrow, so we don't really have to worry about the opposition to Saturn. The only thing the moon really is doing is making a conjunction to the south node. Certainly that needs to be talked about. Moon conjunct south node. We have to watch our feelings. We have to watch our emotional responses, because we might respond in a way that is not necessarily right. Moon in Virgo conjunct with south node, perhaps just focusing on the wrong things. We find it easier to focus on particular details. We don't want to focus on perhaps the big picture. North node in Pisces, but we don't want to do that. So we need to think about our emotional responses. I mean, in a way, we can't help our emotional responses, but the way we respond is the way we respond. And, that is, you could argue, that's the way it is. Additionally, Mercury is sextile Chiron. So Mercury at 24 Aquarius, sextile Chiron at 24 Aries. I think that that is a fairly benign aspect. It is a sextile. I think that might say something about how we communicate, how we choose to communicate, and if we want to make an impression, perhaps we can. We want to be different, don't we, with Chiron in Aries. We don't want to just follow the crowd, particularly as Mercury's in Aquarius. I mean, that's a very independent-minded sign for Mercury to be in. So Mercury in Aquarius wants to perhaps, say it as it is, perhaps point things out that other people are not interested in, but need to be interested in. And, when we're talking about Chiron, we're also talking about the maverick. And some of us might just want to be the maverick, and there's certainly no harm in that. Additionally, Mars making a semi-sextile to the North Node, therefore a quincunx to the South Node. That Mars quincunx, Mars semi-sextile North Node, you could look at it in two ways. You could argue that there is some behavior pattern which is not necessarily in accord with our destiny, but it might be in accord with our destiny if we were to think about it. Mars in Aquarius plays the North Node in Pisces. North Node in Pisces. We need to be able to just not get entirely focused on small details, but at the same time, with that Mars in Aquarius, we've got to be independent-minded and use our energy in an independent-minded way, but we mustn't take it too far. And then you could also argue that North Node is about other people from a sort of German perspective, like Reinhold Ebertin's approach to astrology, and Alfred Witter. The German approach is to see the North Node as being about contacts with others. So Mars semi-sextile North Node. How do we really get in touch with people? How do we do it? We don't want to just completely fit in without question, but on the other hand, we don't want to take things too far. We don't want to be too aggressive. We don't want to be too independent-minded, but we've got to still maintain our fundamental, identity. So that's the picture for New York. If we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, for noon in Sydney, the moon is at sort of 28 Leo. So that is a reminder that if you are in Australasia or East Asia, the first part of the day, the moon is actually going to be in Leo. It's going to it's going to be making a square to Uranus. So in fact, moon square Uranus, which you might think is kind of sort of a fragment of yesterday, Monday, if you're in the Americas, for example. In Australia, Australia, New Zealand, it could be very real. And with moon square Uranus, things could be sort of not necessarily entirely stable. There are maybe moments when people behave in a way that is, ever so slightly unexpected, and we shouldn't forget that Uranus is getting ready to go stationary direct. It's still got that R next to it, showing it's retrograde, but it's not going to be retrograde for much longer. I think isn't it tomorrow, the 4th, that Uranus goes direct. So, that is a difference between Australasia and, certainly Europe and America. There is a great chunk of time where the moon is in Leo. Moon is on Regulus, so moon on Regulus, that could say something about famous people and what famous people are doing. Of course, Moon can, I know, but Mandelson, well, that's more about today. You know, Mandelson, he's Peter Mandelson. He was I mean, it is not really a point about Australia, but Peter Mandelson was a leading light in the British Labour Party, and he is getting wrecked by his association with Jeffrey Epstein. I should have talked about him in my last video, but I'll try to talk about Peter Mandelson sooner rather than later. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. So here is here's the heliocentric chart, and so the Earth is moving towards sort of 15 Leo, because the Earth is always opposition where the Sun is, because we've got the Sun at 15 Aquarius. I said Sun at 15 Aquarius. That is Astrological Candlemas. It's 15 degrees. Aquarius is 45 degrees from the Aries point, and we've still got that Mars-Pluto conjunction. I mean, it's sort of grinding on, but Mars is a relatively slow planet. Remember, Mars takes about 2 years to go through all the signs. So we've got all the sort of power and intensity of that aspect, and so that's about the things we want to do, the things we want to achieve, and we might be very determined about it, perhaps too determined, and some people might really want to apply their power. And one thing about the Earth, well, you could say that the Earth is making a kind of it's beginning to make a sesquiquadrate to Neptune, and then a sesquiquadrate to Saturn. But that's not for another couple of degrees. But Earth making that sesquiquadrate to a Saturn-Neptune conjunction later in the week. That might be just about what we're experiencing down here, what we're feeling, our insecurities, the things we're worried about. But I'll be talking about that in a few days' time. And we have Venus square Uranus. That should not be forgotten. I mean, I mentioned Venus square Uranus yesterday. Venus changing sign. Uranus has actually recently changed sign. So Uranus is in heliocentric Gemini. Venus is in heliocentric Pisces. They're making a square. So certain people might be unpredictable, difficult to know what they're going to do next. They could do anything, and they could do nothing. They may not quite match our expectations, and our own feelings about other people could be in a state of flux. One moment we think one thing, another moment we think another thing, and as far as other people are concerned, we just shouldn't necessarily assume that they're going to take any particular course of action. So that's the heliocentric view, and now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, February the 3rd, 2026. Aries, you continue to have quite a strong sense of who you are, and this relates to what Mars is doing. Mars is your ruler, and Mars continues to be aspected by those Aquarian planets. I mean, we know that it's still conjunct Pluto. If you look at the chart, Mars is actually sort of halfway between the Sun and Pluto. Therefore, it's on the Sun-Pluto midpoint. So, if you think about Sun and Pluto together, that is about the desire to assert yourself, the desire to be powerful, the desire to make things happen your way, whatever your way is. So, yeah, you do have a sense of what you'd like to achieve, and maybe you're not happy with second best, and in an ideal world you might feel that you would demand something and you would just get it, and that might say something about your expectations of other people. Right now other people are somewhat difficult to avoid. I mean, not in a one-to-one sense, but more in terms of the group. I mean, there are people to associate with, if you so wish, but it somehow feels that there is a bit of a battle. Who is in control? Who has the power? And that might be the question. And so this raises the issue, Aries, of how do you go about it? What is the best approach, and what is your sort of natural instinct? I mean, kind of unusually, well, not unusually, but we got the moon in Virgo at the moment, and so your natural instinct, or at least what you feel is the right approach, would be to just make sure you do things properly. Just to pay attention. And if you pay attention to what's in front of you, then you're going to be able to see the path forward. You'll know what needs to be done. Perhaps something has been done wrong, needs to be fixed. You listen to what people are saying. Someone gets it wrong, you correct them, and you make sure that things are as good as possible. And perhaps you think it's important to have high standards, not just for yourself, but also for other people. But there is a danger here, Aries, that in doing that you miss out on some of the more important details, and I'm thinking more of the emotional details. Yeah, you can be close to people, you can be paying attention, but there just might be certain things you miss. Maybe it's just a case of not being able to read the room. I mean, I'm not even saying that Aries is an unemotional sign or has issues picking up emotion. I mean, every Aries, like everyone else, has very strong emotions, but there just might be some things you just miss. And what you need to do is try to look at everything on many different levels. And that might not, to begin with, be particularly easy, but once things become clear, and I think they can become clear, you'll know how to proceed. And additionally, Mars is making a semi-sextile to the North Node, and I think that reinforces what I'm saying. North Node in Pisces, that is about listening to what's going on with your heart, not your mind. And yeah, you might want to do things your way, but if you really want to do things your way and be successful doing things your way, then you've got to listen. You've got to listen with your heart. You've got to sort of understand what people are trying to communicate on a non-verbal level. So it can be done, and you just need to perhaps focus on the right things, focus on perhaps the emotional complexities and what people are communicating, what the world is communicating on a non-verbal level. And if you can pick up on that, I think that you can still take the initiative, and I think you can still take the initiative and be successful. Taurus, you want to do things in a way that is different. You don't want to just be just another person in the group. That's not really what you want to do. I think that you have an individual path. I think you regard this path as being very important, and you want to stand out, and I think you can stand out. Don't forget Venus, your ruler, is in Aquarius, and you know what is different. You know how to be different, and if you can be different, I think that would be that would be great. So don't feel you have to do things in a particular way. And if you want to be an individual, if you've got ideas about how to be an individual, then don't be afraid. Okay, not everyone is going to necessarily appreciate what you do, but sometimes it just needs to be it really does need to be done. But the question is, how far do you go? I think that right now your creativity is probably on pretty good form. The moon is in Virgo. The moon is an earth sign. You can do stuff which is not just useful but also practical, and you can almost sort of revel in it. And it might be that you're able to pick up on something that you were doing in the past that had worked very well in the past, but you kind of had lost track of it. But now you can get back into the groove and realize that really nothing has changed. Certainly nothing has changed for the worse. I mean, things are as good as they used to be. Your abilities are on peak form, or are very close to being on peak form, and you've just got to give it a go, and that's great. Although you don't want to be too far removed from the world around you. I mean, ideally, you would do something that you enjoy, that perhaps you are allowed or able to pick up something from the past that also relates to other people as well, that is relevant to society, that is perhaps relevant to your friends and others, and you can really sort of get appreciated for it. But in the process, you've got to perhaps think about the social dimension. So there's this bit of a contrast there. You've kind of got to be an individual, but you mustn't forget about society, yet you can't allow society to be the only thing that matters. So you kind of got to sort of try as far as you can to get the balance right. And also, Taurus, do think carefully about your emotional responses. How do you respond to a particular situation? What is the first way you respond? Think about that. The first emotional response. And your first emotional response might be to just look at how things are on the surface. I mean, that seems the obvious way. Look at what's in front of you, and you respond to that in a particular way. But your first emotional response to something may not be the best emotional response. And so before responding, you need to just let things fit in. Sorry, what's the word? Soak in. Just be a little bit aware of the emotional environment, because Taurians can be quite insensitive in that way. I mean, I'm saying this as as someone who's got their ascendant in Taurus and their Mars in Taurus, but it can also be the case with people who've got their Sun in Taurus. I haven't really been close to a Taurian for some time, but Taurians can do that. They can just say things which are just not just blunt, but can just be quite jarring. They can just kill the buzz. They say something which is totally the wrong thing to say, and to them it seems right. They're just responding to how they feel, what seems to them to be the case. But they don't kind of think it through, and they don't think, what are the consequences of someone saying this? And they say it, and it's too late. So if you feel something, don't necessarily say it. Wait for the second feeling, the third feeling. Just let it sink in, and try to understand the broader context, particularly when other people are concerned. But you can do it. I'm not saying you don't need to feel that you're in a situation where you have to be blunt. I mean, maybe you want to be blunt, but I'd recommend against it. I think you try to take into account what's going on around you. Try to take into account the wider emotional environment. Gemini. Mercury is making a sextile to Chiron. This sextile to Chiron is, you could say it's quite a minor aspect. On the other hand, there's not a huge amount going on today. I mean, astrologically, it's a bit light. I'm not saying it's going to be a light day, but theoretically, it's quite light. There aren't many exact aspects. And so, Mercury sextile Chiron, because there isn't much else going on, maybe that's Mercury sextile Chiron will be perhaps more important than it usually is. So as far as what that aspect sort of might mean, of course, Mercury represents you. And with the sextile to Chiron, I think that this gives you an opportunity to really be yourself and to do things which don't entirely fit in, that could rock the boat, but that depends. And it depends what kind of day you are choosing for yourself, because there's always a bit of choice here. I mean, I think that the average Gemini might feel that they don't want to be around. You just might not want to mix with other people. You might be happiest, when you're on your own, doing things in your own way. That might be fine for you. That might be, all you want, all you need. And so, in which case, that Mercury sextile Chiron might not be such an issue, because Mercury sextile Chiron could be disruptive, and easily disruptive. You just show off your natural talents, and you say what's on your mind. You try to be an individual, and you do it pretty well. I think because you're showing off a bit of talent, you may not get too much of a negative response. But you want to be different, and it's quite easy to be different. And I think it's quite easy to show off your talents and to show off how independent-minded you are. And additionally, Gemini, this might be a time where you feel it's time to do some reframing. People have got lots of ideas. People have assumed that things work in one way, and then you, Gemini, you come along with this Mercury sextile Chiron, and you want to look at things differently. And it's in everyone's best interests, probably, this Mercury sextile Chiron. Not everyone is going to necessarily appreciate that, but does that matter? But there is this question: can you be bothered? That is a big question. I think that ideally, or at least in your ideal world, Gemini, you would like to just hold firm, stick to what you know, stick to what you trust, and why have to bother about anyone else? I mean, do they really matter? And maybe they don't matter. But I think if you were to go too far down that road, just thinking about yourself, just thinking about what's important to you, just thinking about your own security, maybe your own family, I think that you would be missing something, and there is pressure coming in another direction. And I think that there is something you need to just push out, the outside world. If you're working, that means your career, your workplace. There may be some sort of organization, some groups, some society, some way in which you're supposed to be asserting yourself, and not forgetting that Saturn is still in Pisces. Saturn is not going to be in Pisces for much longer. February the 14th, Valentine's Day, Valentine's Day, Saturn leaves Pisces, and so the next couple of weeks, it's less than a fortnight now, 12 days, 11 days before Saturn moves into Pisces. In this last 11 days, with Saturn in a pretty high profile sector of your chart, that's asking you to get something together and to realize that something needs to be done. And it might be a culmination of the last couple of years. You're starting to understand what you have to do. And you know, it's not that it's too late to take the act. It's not that it's too late to take the action, but it may very soon be too late to make that first move. And the first move can be anything. There's just something you really need to start getting going on, and it may not be enough just to stay in your secure space. You might have to reach out, move out. No, sorry, not move out, but you have to think about the outside world and interact with the outside world. And there is pressure in that direction. But as far as you're concerned, Gemini, I think there's a lot of sort of dead weight here. You might just prefer to just do nothing and to just fall back onto what you know and trust, perhaps your family and your home. But I wouldn't recommend that course of action. I think there are other things that need to be done. But if you do nothing, then that might just be another couple of days wasted, and that is definitely not what we need. And in fact, a Gemini, if you are prepared to assert yourself, and I think many Geminis don't necessarily want to assert themselves, but if you are prepared to assert yourself, then I do think that you can really make a real impression. You might not feel you can make a real impression, but actually you can, and people will take notice of you. And if it's something you don't like and something you want to change, then I think you can do it. And if you don't feel assertive, but if you try, I mean, you don't know if you don't try, but if you do try, you'll find that you actually cover a lot of ground very quickly, and you can cause quite a lot of disturbance. And don't forget Mercury sextile Chiron, as I was saying right at the beginning. And Mercury sextile Chiron says, you can be a maverick. You can do things differently. You can say things which may in their own way be quite shocking, but it's all for the good. It's all about you making progress and perhaps ever so slightly moving outside your comfort zone. Cancer. So we have got the moon moving out of Leo and into Virgo, and moon and Virgo. It's a great sign for the moon to be in. I mean, the moon rules the earth signs by night. That's the thing about the earth signs. With the earth signs, at least the system I use, you've got William Lilly in Christian Astrology. He goes over it. I'm sure other astrologers do. My knowledge of sort of historical astrological sources could be better, but the moon rules the earth signs by night. Venus rules the earth signs by day. So the moon in Virgo certainly does have some strength. And being a Cancerian, that means that the moon in Virgo, it's in your third house, because Virgo is the third house from Cancer. Cancer number 1, Leo number 2, Virgo number 3. And so the moon, as I say, it joys in the third house. It's the best place for the moon. And because of that, Cancer, I think that once that transition starts happening, from Leo to Virgo, you're just going to feel good. Now, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon will not move into Virgo until, I think, sort of early afternoon. But everywhere else, okay, Australia, New Zealand, East Asia. But if you're in Europe, the Americas, then the moon will move into Virgo pretty early in the day. Even if you're in India, that would be just before 8:51. I think 8:51 a.m. So even in India or Pakistan, the moon will move into Virgo this morning. So with the moon in Virgo, things do feel easy. I think easier, certainly easier from the moon in Leo, because when the moon was in Leo, it was all around the time of the full moon. This full moon revelations are all over the place, and people are still absorbing the Epstein revelations, and a lot of news. And if you're in the UK, there's all the sort of news about Mandelson, this former government minister who has done all sorts of things. I think there were photographs of him wandering around Epstein's house in his underwear, and so forth. But it's about revelations, and but now that the moon is moving into Virgo, just things are easier, and you're able more to just be yourself, and there is no pressure. I mean, the moon doesn't make any aspects in early Virgo. Okay, will make an opposition to Saturn and a trine to Uranus, at the end of the sign. But this is the beginning of Virgo, and because of that, you Cancer might just feel that you can just be yourself. That's great, and you can talk in a way that's quite free-flowing, and you don't have to discuss anything of particular significance, and all the while time could be wasted. There is that danger, and the problem here would be that the moon is making a conjunction to the south node, and the south node, remember, is the line of least resistance. How do you want to have an easy life? Just do what comes naturally, and maybe nothing gets done. And in particular, you don't learn anything new. You're just recycling old information. It's easier to recycle old information because it's not challenging. But the North Node is in Pisces, and you need to think about that, because you need to look at things in a new way. You need to be more sort of forward thinking. Just think about all the possibilities in front of you. You may have taken a particular piece of knowledge for granted, just assumed it was obvious, but it's not obvious. Nothing's obvious. You need to do some thinking, researching, questioning, and you absolutely should not assume that you know everything. And some Cancerians can make that assumption. Not all Cancerians, but it can happen, and they don't want to be told. And there is a stubbornness, and there can be an intellectual stubbornness to some Cancerians. Now, Cancer, by the way, can be a very intelligent sign. It can be one of the most intelligent signs, can be, but it can still be intellectually stubborn. And you just think, you've got it sorted out, so why bother? Why bother with anything else? But I think you do need to be bothered, and you have the capacity here to learn new things, to discover new things. And the question is, are you going to use that capacity? And I think there is an inclination, Cancer, to do nothing and just to just stick to what you know, stick to what you trust, and not challenge yourself. But it's only an inclination. And therefore, Cancer, if you make the effort to look at things again, to look at things in a more complicated way, to find out as much as possible about things, to not assume that you know everything, then I think you will be rewarded. Leo. The sun is at 15 degrees Aquarius, right in the middle of the sign Aquarius. And that's a special degree. I mean, I'll be talking about that at the end of the video, because, it is the astrological Candlemas, that halfway point between the solstice and the equinox. It's when the sun is 45 degrees from the Aries point, 45 degrees from the solstice point. It's a point of power. In a positive note, it really is a point of power. And this means that, Leo, you are aware. you are aware of what's happening in the world. You are connected, like it or not, and that might be reflected by some of your thoughts and your feelings. And even if you are uncertain about something, it may just be the case of at least you know what you don't know. You can see, you can see how complicated things are. And the sun, when it crosses this 15 degrees Aquarius point, it's also making a 45-degree aspect to Neptune. I think that 45-degree aspect to Neptune is technically tomorrow. It might depend. Maybe if you're in the Americas, it's today. But it's pretty close to that Sun semi-square Neptune, and that is an aspect that is important. And so with Sun semi-square Neptune, you are perhaps connected to the cosmos and the confusions and complexities of this cosmos, in a very sort of powerful way. And part of you, Leo, might kind of panic. This is just too much. How can you deal with it all? But it's not your problem. You're just seeing things as they are, and perhaps instead you should not feel that anything has to be done. I mean, not in a sort of an active way. I think there is an argument, Leo, for you just to respond. Look at other people, see how they are responding, and then see how they are responding, and then don't respond yourself. Just watch. That's what I meant to say. And you shouldn't feel that you have to take any particular initiative, and I do think that is important. I think if you try to do anything positive, if you try to do things your way, then I think you might be disappointed. It just might be really hard work to get anything done. Instead, just observe, see what's going on, and as far as relationships are concerned, let the other person do the talking, perhaps the acting as well. That way you'll just get a clearer picture, of the way things should be, and don't worry too much about smaller details. You might be tempted to sort of think about, for example, money. In fact, you could. I think that you might see everything in a financial dimension. You might be asking, well, what is the cost? What might the cost be? And that is a legitimate question, but you don't want it to completely overwhelm you. You might be in a situation, for example, where it appears that money really is important, but it might not be important at all. So don't jump to conclusions. It might be an issue, that seems to be about money. You might take the view that someone else is motivated by money, but it might be a lot more complicated than that. Try not to be too materialistic, and try not to see a financial cause for everything, because money is not the root of everything. At least today it might not be the root of everything, even though it might appear to be. There might be something else going on, something more complicated, and that's another reason why you need to take the time to understand what's going on, why you absolutely mustn't rush into making conclusions which could turn out to be wrong. Virgo. Well, at least we got the moon in your sign. In one sense, that's great that the moon is in Virgo. It's better for the moon being in Leo. And the moon in Leo. We had a full moon not so long ago, and we were kind of still feeling that full moon while the moon was in Leo, and it was difficult to know what to do, difficult to know how to respond. But now that the moon has entered Virgo, I do think that things seem easier. things might seem simpler. You can understand things. You can understand what things look like on the surface, and but there might be some danger here that you spend sort of too much time worrying about small surface details, because that's not the whole story. And so don't feel that just because something looks in a particular way, it really is like that. And this especially applies to when you're sort of dealing with the world. You might want to deal with the world in a rather materialistic way. I mean, it's certainly the safe way, it's the obvious way, but it's not necessarily the right way. And you also have to consider what other people's priorities are. I think that if you spend too much time worrying about what things look like, or perhaps what things cost, then there's a danger that you might make a mistake, or it's quite possible, Virgo, that you could embarrass yourself. So do think about other people, do think about perhaps the social dimension, and perhaps you should wait for perhaps another person to make the move, or to give their impressions. Because if you just jump in, you say things which sound obvious. Yeah, that is a reason why you could embarrass yourself. But there's no doubt that many Virgos are becoming a lot more assertive. You're able to apply your energy, and if you feel that something needs to be done, someone you want to get in touch with, you can do it. You're going to have actually quite a lot of energy. Now, you could go about things the wrong way. You could just sort of rush in without thinking, just looking at surface appearances. Yeah, that is a way of doing it, and that might not be especially fortunate. On the other hand, if you can sort of combine assertion with sensitivity, just asking yourself what is really going on, giving yourself the time to work out what is happening. There isn't so much of a rush here. Give yourself the time. Take some time to look at what other people are doing, so that you can sort of respond in the right way. Then I think that you can get it right. And additionally, there can be something about your approach that is rather original, and a bit of originality can go a long way. Especially now that Mercury is making a sextile to Chiron, and that's Mercury sextile Chiron needs to be handled in the right way. I think Mercury sextile Chiron is a great aspect. Chiron is the maverick. Chiron wants to do things differently, wants to say things which not everyone is going to be appreciated, but that's not the same as insensitivity. That's not the same as just focusing on the material side of things. You do need to go deeper. You need to understand what makes other people tick. So that means that if you are going to upset anyone or be insensitive, you should know what you're doing. You shouldn't be surprised by another person's response. It should all be to some extent planned. And if you see things differently, and if you want to be independent and have an independent-minded approach, go ahead. But it's just important to have your eyes open. You're trying to just deal with the complexities of the world in which you're living, and perhaps dealing with also things that are wrong, things that you find to be wrong. And that goes back to a Mercury sextile Chiron. Mercury sextile Chiron is actually quite compassionate. If someone is being treated unfairly, you have an opportunity to say it, and your words will really hit home. Libra, it might be a slow day, and perhaps that's a good thing. We've just had the the full moon. I don't know about you, but this full moon has been quite exhausting. I know a lot of people have found this full moon to be difficult, and so, the moon moving out of Leo and into Virgo, that really does suggest that the immediate period of this full moon is over. And from your perspective, moon moving into Virgo, not a great deal happening today. That just might mean that, the pressure is off. There's nothing that you necessarily need to do, and it might be, Libra, that you just want to do things your way, and perhaps enjoy the fact that there really isn't much pressure. And I think you could get away with that. I'm not saying that that is exactly the right approach. I think, Libra, there are certain things that you do need to attend to, or no, I don't say need to attend to, that I think you could benefit from attending to. I mean, I think that, it is still the beginning of a week, it's the beginning of a month, and, it would be good if you could, set things up for yourself and save yourself effort at a later stage. So, if something could be done, then maybe you should do it. I mean, I know one's tempted to go by the idea that, why do today what you can put off until tomorrow? And there might be quite a lot of things like that. There's nothing you absolutely have to do. You could do it today, you could do it tomorrow, and probably if you could do it today, if that really is possible, then that might be best. And in fact, if one is asking, what is the right thing for Librans to be doing? Well, the right thing for Librans to be doing is to be getting things out of the way, and not to be sort of drifting off on sort of clouds of nothing. I won't even say fantasy, because fantasy indicates that something is actually going on. You're imagining all sorts of weird and wonderful things. It's not even like that. It's just that you might in fact, Libra, be slowed down by thinking about all the things that have to be done. And there are so many things that in theory have to be done that you end up doing nothing. That is a possibility. And so it might then be best that you just decide on one thing, give it your best shot, and do a good job. It's not a spectacular job, and leave it at that. And so it could really be, quite a straightforward day. At the same time, you are really capable of being an individual. I mean, part of it is because we've got all these planets in Aquarius, and we got Venus in Aquarius as well. So with Venus in Aquarius, I think that you have a chance to be yourself, and really make the most of it. While Venus is in this sign, Venus is now at 21 Aquarius, so Venus is moving into the last decanate of the sign. So things have changed to some extent with that decanate change, and you're reminded perhaps that something might slowly be coming to an end. And I think Venus moves into Pisces. Is it February the 10th? I mean, it's not so bad, Venus moving into Pisces. Venus is exalted in that sign. But still, with Venus in Aquarius, there's maybe just something that you should be doing and should be thinking about that does relate to your unique identity. And it's not about what other people are looking for. It's about you, and what does make you different. And don't forget that Mercury is making a sextile to Chiron, and with this Mercury sextile Chiron, some Librans do have the opportunity to make it clear to another person who they are and who they are not. And it may may just be just a few words. It's not like you're telling anyone anything. You just say something, and you say something which doesn't necessarily fit in with another person's conception of you. You know, that really is a surprise to them, and they realize that you are different, that you are more multi-layered. So that is a possibility. But all of this is optional. For many Librans, it just might be a day where not a great deal is going on. It would be a shame if nothing happened. And if you feel that nothing is going to go on, but things are looking really empty, well, I do think that there is one thing you can do. As I've already said, I think there's one thing that is possibly quite boring. You could do it tomorrow, but I would suggest you do it today, get it out of the way, and I think that's going to make it easier for you later in the week. Scorpio. A lot of planets in Aquarius, as usual, with our five. Still got 5 planets in Aquarius, and those Aquarius planets could be weighing you down. And Mars is conjunct Pluto. I mean, Mars-Pluto conjunction. Okay, it's not an exact conjunction. Well, it's heliocentrically. Mars is pretty close to Pluto. Geocentrically, it's about 5 degrees out. But Mars-Pluto can be intense, and it can just start to just focus on things in a way that is very single-minded, and in certain cases could be quite destructive. It's destructive because you're putting just too much energy into one thing, and you could end up exhausting yourself, maybe exhausting other people as well. And additionally, Mars is halfway between the conjunction of the Sun and the conjunction of Pluto. I mean, that might not seem immediately obvious. Well, but you see, the Sun is moving away from Mars, and Mars is moving away from Pluto, and right now Mars is on the Sun-Pluto midpoint, and so with Mars on the Sun-Pluto midpoint, that emphasizes what I was saying about your ability to be, really, really quite intense, to really think that some things are just so important that they can't be discussed, they can't be shared. Only you, a Scorpio, understand them. Okay, that might be an exaggeration, but I mean, I think that is a possibility. Maybe you can afford to be more open and more relaxed, and you don't want to be entirely focused on just one thing. I mean, that could be exhausting for yourself, and it could also be exhausting for other people. And as far as the Sun is concerned, one should always look at the Sun. The Sun is an important planet. Okay, I know it's a satellite, not a planet, but the Sun can be quite important. The Sun is now halfway through Aquarius. It's at 15 degrees Aquarius. That's why I'm calling this video the Astrological Michaelmas. Yesterday, sorry, not Michaelmas, Candlemas. Yesterday was Candlemas, the Celtic or the Celtic festival of Imbolc, February the 2nd. But now the Sun is at 50, just after Imbolc, so that's why it's the Astrological Imbolc. The Sun at 15 degrees Aquarius. That is a point of power. And it's a point of power which is, it's true, intense and personal, but it also relates to everything. And it relates to your ambitions, to your goals, and perhaps it is a time when you understand at some quite deep level, what actually needs to be done. And it seems very confusing. The Sun is making a semi-square to Neptune. You may not know what you're doing. If you have a career, you have a job, you may be asking yourself, what is going on? If you're looking for a job, you may just feel confused. But this confusion may not be such a bad thing. it's reminding you, yeah, that things are confusing, but it's also giving you the opportunity to be open to other possibilities, and those possibilities may be starting to become ever so slightly clear. And so if you start to have an idea about your direction, about where you should be going, and particularly a new idea, something that hadn't occurred to you before, then this might be important. This might be what it's all about. So you kind of go down into yourself. You ask yourself, who are you? What are you all about? And this process of intense grounding has been going on for some time, but now it's perhaps reaching its culmination, and you're starting to see new possibilities, possibilities that you might well be interested in, but you don't necessarily have to do anything right now. For example, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you make an effort to spend time socializing. I mean, you might want to spend time socializing. Maybe you feel it's the right thing to do, but I wouldn't recommend it. I think that if you spend a long time, with a group of people in a group situation, you might just feel that you're being distracted, that you have got better things to do. And it's not just about you staying in one place. It's about you slowly thinking about, what you are all about. As I've just suggested, it is becoming clearer. And, Saturn is about to move into Aries, but it's still in Pisces. Pisces is a sign that is Scorpio friendly, and Saturn is in the same sign right now as the North Node. And so if you're getting insights about your direction, which I think you should be, and it doesn't matter how old you are, we all redefine our direction as we go older until the very end, and I don't know what we think about in terms of direction when we approach our terminal breath, but there's always a direction. We're always moving on to something else, and maybe that's what we're talking about. What is the direction at this stage of life, whatever that stage of life is, and I think perhaps that's something that today might help you with, even if it doesn't seem obvious. You do think about it, and it all makes sense for you to be so intense. As I said right at the beginning of this piece on Scorpio, I talked about your intensity. There's no point in being intense just for the sake of it. You're intense because you're trying to find something out. You're trying to find something out about yourself. Sagittarius, you're thinking about the future. The future maybe in quite a material way, thinking about what you would like to be doing, what you would also like to be achieving, and it becomes clear that there are things that need to be done, quite specific things. So you need to do this and you need to do that, and you may need to make sure that certain things are properly organized. That's especially the case if you're working. So if you're working, you might put a lot of emphasis on it. It might feel very important, and the feeling of importance and moving somewhere, perhaps satisfying people like employers, other authority figures, might be just something you feel does matter. Now that's not a typically Sagittarian approach, but it's what you kind of feel you need to do. You kind of want to be in everyone's good books. You don't really want to rock the boat, and that's kind of good. I mean, I think that you can certainly make a good impression, and you can use skills that you're already very familiar with. You can use these skills to make solid progress, but you don't want to lose sight of who you are. I mean, that does matter. I mean, Saturn is still in Pisces. The North Node is in Pisces. Pisces is a sign which from a Sagittarian perspective, is about who you are. It's about your roots, and what you don't want to do is be in a situation where you're so keen to please other people, again, particularly if you're in positions of authority, that you lose sight of who you are. And that's something that you've got to keep in mind. But I don't want to say that trying hard in your career or trying hard to get a job is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. I mean, it should come quite easily, and you can be relatively successful given whatever constraints might be upon you. But you have to sort of look beyond it and just make sure that you are acting in a way that is in keeping with everything that is important to you. And while you're at it, Sagittarius, your ability to relate to other people is going to be good, even if you don't know them, perhaps especially if you don't know them. If you don't know someone particularly well, that means you don't have any prejudice. Perhaps you don't make assumptions about what you should say and what you shouldn't say. And if you can act in a way that is free and spontaneous, then I think a lot of people are going to really appreciate that. Capricorn. It's important that you have a staged approach, and by a staged approach, I'm talking about getting things in order, taking things, one step at a time. First of all, you need to understand what is going on. You need to get the facts straight, and having got the facts straight, you are then in a position to make conclusions. I think that there is just some danger today that you might be tempted to reach conclusions and then come up with the facts, or find the facts, or go fishing for the facts to support your ideas. So when you think about not just ideas, but your principles, your overall philosophy. So do think about what you believe in and how your beliefs are influencing perhaps your information processing. That's often how it works, isn't it? This sort of top-down approach, and so you sift through the information and you ignore facts that aren't in accord with your ideas or your basic principles, and that's how you move forward. I mean, that's a logical way to move forward, but it's not necessarily the right approach. And over the course of the day, it might be becoming clear that certain things need to be taken more seriously, at a quite basic level. There's no harm in just trying to get hold of information for the sake of it, not assuming that it's necessarily going anywhere. And so you gather things together, you gather the facts, you gather the details, and then you start to draw conclusions, and perhaps you even start to develop a coherent philosophy. So perhaps you should today try as far as possible to be in a philosophy-free zone where you don't have any overarching beliefs which are just determining everything. I mean, it's something I think you can do. I think that you are a Capricorn, you are quite practical. You know that beliefs can take you in many places, and those beliefs may not always be desirable. And I should say that on a sort of a mental level, you're capable at the moment of being very, very focused. You can focus on the things that matter, and you can really give it your best shot. And once you start to think about something, once you're looking at it, your intensity can really move things, and you can get into details, you can get into new levels of detail, and what questions can be asked. And this is also reflected in how you deal with other people. You can be certainly quite convincing if you're trying to get someone to believe something. Now that's a problem, because as I've already said, you don't necessarily need to be too tied to your beliefs. I know it's good if you can persuade someone to believe something. It's a sort of a sign that you're in control. But before doing that, you need to ask yourself whether your beliefs are grounded in reality. And at the same time, I think, Capricorn, you're going to be an effective arguer. So the question is, what are you arguing for? And is it worthwhile? Is it helpful? So just because you can win an argument doesn't mean that you should necessarily go through with it. It might be better, rather than get yourself involved in an argument or even just a discussion, to just wait and just see what's going on, observe, familiarize yourself with the details, and then perhaps at a later stage work out how best to proceed. Aquarius. We still have a lot of planets in Aquarius, and we had the full moon. So that full moon in Leo, which may have had quite an important impact on you. That full moon, remember, right across the main axis of your chart. We know we had the sun in Aquarius, moon in Leo, and then the moon was making aspects to all those Aquarius planets. Now the moon is now moving out of Leo. So what that means, Aquarius, is that the the immediate phase of the full moon is over. The sun and the moon are no longer in signs opposite one another. And that is possibly going to make things easier. There's perhaps less stress, less conflict, maybe less potential for conflict, and instead it's maybe a time to reflect, a time to sort of look at things more deeply. So you have these sort of realizations that have been taking place over the last few days, and they may have been coming through sort of thick and fast. We are in a time of revelation. It's just interesting that the Epstein files got released just before the Aquarius, before the Leo full moon. Of course, Epstein, I'm afraid Epstein is probably an Aquarius. Yeah, Epstein is an Aquarius. I always sometimes think that Epstein is still alive, that he's some sort of living being. But Epstein did have his sun in Aquarius, so it's interesting that full moon, in terms of revelations about Epstein, and I'm just looking at the news, even though it's now Monday, several days after the files, people are still talking about it. Certainly, of how it relates to the UK, and revelations relating to Prince Andrew and this former politician Peter Mandelson. So that phase of sort of understanding things, however it worked for you, is now perhaps over. The phase of revelation is over, and now it's just a time to just work out what it all means, and perhaps sort of to put it together in a way that is in accordance with your sort of emotional compass and your emotional sort of well-being. Emotions do matter now that the moon is in Virgo, and you need to sort of look after yourself, and you don't want any more surprises or shocks. And if you can make things as simple as possible, that would be good. But on a perhaps a more positive note, Aquarius, I think that you're pretty effective when it comes to persuasion. I think you can be very persuasive today. Your words carry a lot of weight. I mean, Mercury, of course, the planet of communication, still in your sign, and so that Mercury gives you a lot of power, and it's also just about presenting information in such a way that is quite compelling. And if you're trying to get someone to believe something, I think you can be quite successful. Whether or not that is a good thing kind of depends. But I do think, Aquarius, you're going to be quite good at arguing your particular point of view. Pisces. Moon is in Virgo. It's in your opposite sign, and it's making a conjunction to the South Node. And this is possibly the most important event of the day. I mean, it's a short event in the sense that the Moon is not going to be conjunct the South Node for very long, but we do have the Moon and the South Node in the same sign, and it perhaps means that you need to make a special effort to look after your own independence. There could well be pressure to, I don't know, follow someone else, to follow someone else's line of argument, or to just make everyone happy. I mean, why not? I mean, that's just the easiest approach, isn't it? I mean, why do you want to cause a fuss? If everyone is making assumptions, well, just fit in with the assumptions. That's the way to go, isn't it? Well, it's not the way to go. I think it is a time where you need to make a special effort to be yourself, and you need to safeguard or protect yourself from that first response. And I think at the moment, Pisces, your first response might be to compromise, to even give in, let other people have the first word. And of course, that can be dangerous. I mean, it is a sort of standard technique, isn't it, in committees, that if someone is trying to take control of the agenda, they're always the first person to speak. You're the first person to speak, and you have the initiative, and you can sort of ram through your particular viewpoint, and you have to safeguard against that. So if someone is being really pushy and they really want to get everyone to believe their particular view, then yeah, it's easy to give in, but you have to fight against that. You have to look after your interests throughout the day and question what is being said. Things might be said to you in such a way that it is assumed you will agree with them. And it is not a time to be agreeing with anyone, without thinking, okay, maybe other people know what they're talking about, maybe not. And you shouldn't be put off by surprises. So, there might be a surprise event, and it might feel that you have to respond quickly, you have to make agreements quickly, you have to make decisions quickly, but that's not true. I think you have to give yourself time to think about what is best for yourself. And if you do stick to what is best for yourself, then I think that in the end you will win through. And I think just keep in mind right now that your independence really does matter. So those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to turn to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 63, which is after completion. So after completion represents a situation where we have in theory completed something. We've crossed the river, we've got to the far bank, and that's good. Somehow we got through. But this hexagram doesn't move. There are no moving lines here. And, with no moving lines, well, that might say something about today. It might just feel that something is over, something is done. Maybe we're happy with it, maybe we're not, but it's done, and it's just a time of reflection. And, it could be, for example, be about the fact that we're just after the full moon. So the full moon is finished. I mean, the immediate phase of a full moon is over. We've reached some conclusions. If you look at the world around us, we can see that there have been a lot of revelations, particularly in relationship with reference to the Epstein files, but I'm sure there are other things. And maybe there have been revelations in your life, and it is done. It's a new month, it's a new week. And what now? And that is the question. What now? Because, just because something is done, we've moved from one stage to another, doesn't necessarily mean we see any action at all, and with no moving lines. And this hexagram, after completion, is kind of misleading, because it kind of suggests that something is done. But really, when something is done, when we have made the transition, is arguably when we are most vulnerable, because we're in a new environment. We don't know the rules. We don't know how things are going to work. We don't have a plan, because we have new rules and we haven't worked things out. And so it's very easy in this time sort of after completion for us to lose sight of what is going on, and things can so easily disintegrate into chaos. I mean, in a worst case scenario, we could go back into the river. I mean, if you look at it from a military perspective after completion, and that might be a good way of looking at things. You imagine, I don't know, something like the D-Day landings, or sort of a more negative thing, Gallipoli. I know Gallipoli is particularly important if you're sort of Australia or New Zealand. Gallipoli would be after completion. Yeah, you've landed. Great. Now what? And that's when the trouble starts. Of course, in the D-Day landings, they worked. The Allies had a bridgehead and were able to plough through into continental Europe. With Gallipoli, it didn't work, and in the end, everyone was the troops were kicked off at huge cost, because you need a plan, and you need to make sure that you can deal with the enemy, who are perhaps defending every inch of ground. So perhaps you need to ask, is it Gallipoli, is it D-Day, what kind of a situation is it? Because whatever gains you have, it may be just a small piece of beach, and are you going to be able to stay on that beach? Because it is unstable, and the nuclear hexagram, the hexagram the hexagram under the hexagram, underlying this hexagram, is hexagram number 64, which is before completion. So this dichotomy between before completion, after completion, it's very much with us today, and things are not set in stone. We don't know whether we've really made a successful transition, and I think that is an important point about today. But also, we have no moving lines, so there could just be a sense that things are just not happening. I mean, things might happen in the end, but the question is, what do we do now? And what's the advice? Get yourself together. Make sure that if you have some small success, if you apparently have made a completion, you have made a transition, how are you going to maintain it? How are you going to keep it going? How are you going to stop things disintegrating into chaos? And now I want to finish by looking at this sort of astrological Candlemas. This festival, Candlemas, so as I understand it in a Christian calendar, Candlemas represents the time when Christ is presented in the temple, and just after he was born, and so it kind of makes sense if you follow the calendar. Of course, the calendar doesn't doesn't necessarily conform to reality. But Christ was born on December the 25th. I mean, no, he wasn't born on December the 25th. I don't think he was born on December the 25th. Then you think, in terms of the Advent season, then you might think, oh, well, beginning of February, a bit later, when we got perhaps it's the last element of the Advent season. I'm not quite sure how old Christ was supposed to be when he was presented at the temple. I'm just showing off my complete ignorance of Christianity. I like to think I know a bit about Christianity, but that kind of Advent sequence, and how old is it? I don't know. I'm sure you'll correct me if I've got it wrong, but anyway, it has Christian roots, Candlemas, but it also has Celtic roots. So February the 2nd is this festival of Candlemas. It's also known as imbolc, which is, as I said at the beginning of this video, it's lamb's milk. It's the beginning of a lambing season, and in a more modern way, it's Groundhog Day. So that's February the 2nd, and I'm doing this video for February the 3rd, and so I'm talking about Astrological Candlemas. So what is Astrological Candlemas? Well, it's a cross-quarter day, halfway, roughly, between the solstice and the equinox. Yeah, it's true. February the 2nd is roughly halfway there. But at least this year, it's not exactly there. The exact point where the sun is halfway between 0 degrees Capricorn and 0 degrees Aries is today, and I think I got it right. It is this one. Yep, February the 3rd, 2024, at New York time, just after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 3:01:52 p.m., at least according to the software I'm using. And so there you can see that the sun is exactly at 15 degrees Aquarius. And so this is the Astrological Candlemas. So it's at a precise time. It's not a second earlier, not a second before. I mean, obviously, don't take the seconds too seriously. There's going to be a level of inaccuracy there, but certainly approximately 3:02 p.m. And this is a moment of power. It's not perhaps as strong as the solstice or the equinox, but it's still one of those moments where you can potentially draw up a chart for particular locations and see how it affects different places, and also you need to look at the aspects. So what aspects is the sun making when it is exactly at 0 degrees Aquarius? Well, it's always going to be 45 degrees from the Aries point. It's always going to be 45 degrees from the solstice point. And so it is a point of power. It says something perhaps about the world, over the next 3 months, perhaps between now and, next 6 weeks, between now and the equinox, spring equinox in the northern hemisphere. Obviously in the southern hemisphere it's of a more autumnal nature, and so this point where the sun goes at 15 degrees is at 15 degrees Aquarius is happening just after Neptune moves into Aries. So you can see that Neptune is 0 degrees 13 Aries. So the sun is not just semi-square the Aries point, it's also semi-square Neptune. So there is a real Neptune feel to this period we're in. Neptune, things are confusing, things are nebulous. What are people doing? What are people up to? And you go back to the Epstein files and what's being revealed as a result of the Epstein files, and it seems that it is only just beginning. There is certainly a Neptune feel to the whole thing, and so this is this is the chart set for New York, and I'll be talking about this chart in a moment. But firstly, I just want to look at the dial. So here's a 90-degree dial. So there is Neptune.
Neptune at 0 degrees 13 Aries. There is the Sun. There is the Aries point. The Sun is opposition the Aries point. That is exactly what we would expect. The Sun is 45 degrees from the Aries point, so the Sun is 45 degrees is making the semi-square to Neptune. So the power of this chart is clear. And then we have to ask, what midpoints are on this? So the midpoints that are on that are sort of active at the moment. For example, it's on the Uranus-Pluto and Mercury-Pluto and Venus-Mars midpoint. So there is a Venus-Mars midpoint. There's Pluto, and so Pluto is bringing together Mercury and Uranus. So Uranus-Pluto is it is a time of change. We know it's a time of change, but on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint, where is the Uranus-Pluto midpoint? The Uranus-Pluto midpoint, I think the Uranus-Pluto midpoint is at around is actually at 0 degrees. Is that right? 0 degrees Aries? Yeah, Uranus, because Pluto. Yeah, I mean that makes sense. So it's a direct midpoint. So Uranus-Pluto is about upheaval, about things being changed, things being overthrown, and people just having had enough. And there can be something quite revolutionary about Uranus. And then Mercury-Pluto, communicating this desire for change. Some people really are intense, and it's all becoming clear. It's all becoming obvious, and we've got a propaganda war. People are fighting for people's hearts and minds, and all the while, everyone is in a state of confusion. So I think that this sort of astrological Candlemas, this astrological imbolc, if you take it as a Celtic festival, right, is it is a precise moment, and it's giving us an idea of some of the underlying confusion, but also the struggle. There's real struggle going on with Aries on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. So going back to the chart, there is Uranus, there is Pluto, and halfway between is the Aries point. So that means also that Uranus and Pluto are on they're each other's. I think it's the contra-anticion, because they're being reflected through the Aries point. So Uranus and Pluto are really coming together, and they're coming together with Neptune, and it's a real sort of outer planet event here, with Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, all coming together. I mean, let me just go back to the dial. So if we look at Neptune, there is the midpoints that Neptune is on. You see, Neptune is on Uranus-Pluto midpoint. So all three transpersonal planets are coming together, and again, people are talking about a reset, that things are never going to be the same again. And I think that this astrological imbolc is really telling us this. Now, I have set this chart for New York. I'm not going to go sort of all around the world looking at various places. I'm going to start by looking at New York. And if you set this, I should be setting this to Washington. Let's get real. Let's this is the capital of the capital of the United States. So, capital of the United States, Washington D.C. We have Jupiter. We have Jupiter rising, and we have Saturn on the midheaven. So Jupiter rising. Well, you could say that's actually not so bad, having Jupiter rising. There may be something fortunate coming out because of it. I mean, we've got Saturn on the midheaven as well. It very much links with the great chronocrators. Saturn and Jupiter, are the rulers of time. And so if you've got Jupiter on the ascendant, Saturn on the midheaven, it just might be a key moment, perhaps even a key sort of changeover moment. And particularly now that we've got Neptune moving into Aries, Neptune's not in Pisces anymore. I think that that is an obvious point. And so this chart, it could mean that despite everything, I mean, I know that everyone is thinking that for Trump and that things are really falling apart. At least that's the narrative. Certainly, if you read the progressive press, if you read The Guardian, for example, it does seem that things are really bad for Trump. But maybe not. Maybe that Jupiter on the ascendant, is an advantage. Is advantageous for him because it's Jupiter, not just for him, but for his government, at large. And Saturn on the midheaven. Well, that is more difficult. Saturn on the midheaven. I mean, Saturn is about, it's certainly something about structure. It could be about difficulties and so on. But on the other hand, Saturn and Venus are in mixed reception. Saturn is in in the sign of Venus's exaltation. Venus is in Aquarius, which is in Saturn's sign. So maybe Saturn isn't quite so bad on the midheaven, as it looks. I mean, it doesn't look too good, but it's maybe despite everything, the situation will stabilize. Now, it's interesting that this astrological Candlemas, astrological imbolc, it does take place at the same time, at exactly the same time, as a conjunction between the Moon and the South Node. Regardless of whether it's Washington or anywhere else, Moon is conjunct the South Node. And the Moon conjunct the South Node, I see the Moon conjunct the South Node, well, I could see it in two ways. I mean, I see it like, if I look at it from the South Node as being the line of least resistance, expressing one's feelings in the wrong way. The Moon is an emotional planet. It's how we respond. It's conjunct the South Node, so we respond inappropriately. That is certainly a way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is to look at it in terms of the sign Virgo. It could be a time when people, maybe all of us, are just focusing on small things. Virgo in its worst possible light, not seeing the wood for the trees, knowing the price of everything but the value of nothing. I mean, that is a way of looking at Moon conjunct the South Node, and that could be just a tendency in terms of how people are acting over the next 6 weeks. They just look at the material details, but they're not looking at the underlying picture. So those are a few thoughts on this astrological Candlemas, and I think it is a point of power. And perhaps the key thing about this astrological Candlemas is that the sun and the Aries point. The Aries point is conjunct Neptune, obviously, but the sun is semi-square both Neptune and the Aries point. So I think it kind of adds to the confusion. I think, and as far as America is concerned, there could be an opportunity for the government to get itself together. Of course, it's got to get past the shutdown. It's got to get past. Trump's got to get past the Epstein files, but maybe he'll be okay. I'll be looking at Trump in more detail at a later stage. Anyway, that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.